Good afternoon and welcome to the European section of the Global Energy Outlook Forum 2026. We've been through Asia, we've been through the Middle East, and now we bridge into Europe with passing through. You can't go to Europe, you can't leave the Middle East without stopping off in the very important country of Turkey. And we're facing this question: Turkey at a geostrategic crossroads once again between East and West. Is it East versus West? We've no better person to navigate through the connection of the continents but Mehmet Öğütçü, chairman of the London Energy Club. Mehmet, welcome, joining us today from Nice in the south of France. Thank you for being with us.
Pleasure to join you, Sean, as always.
Let's kick off with the sort of big question, bridging all of these worlds, Middle East to Asia, to Central Asia, to Europe, to Russia, and that is the Ukraine war and how it has impacted Turkey. And the question I wanted to get your sort of initial thoughts on: has the Ukraine war permanently embedded Turkey into Europe's energy security architecture? Something we may not have seen in the past. Turkey and energy security for Europe, not necessarily the case. But has this shifted? Has Russia's invasion of Ukraine embedded Turkey now into Europe's energy security architecture, or is it just a temporary moment? Your thoughts?
I think things are still in flux, and Turkey has not been embedded into European new energy architecture, unfortunately. Still seen as a peripheral transit nation that can allow Caspian gas to move, or some LNG perhaps. And electrical connections have not been made yet, except some small scale with Bulgaria and Greece. But about Turkey being termed as a bridge between East and West, North and South, I think Turks now don't want to use this terminology, because bridge is connecting two shores, whereas Turkey sees itself as a strategic autonomous power, geopolitically as well as energy-wise, not something over which you pass through.
Because if you look at this from the European perspective, can Europe realistically de-risk from Russian energy? I mean, they're famously having stated that by 2027, all natural gas supplies from Russia to Europe should end, including LNG. Can that realistically be achieved without fully integrating Turkey into its energy strategy?
I think Europe has made great success in terms of getting out of the Russian supplies of gas, especially oil and others, and LNG increasing. As you said, they legislated that by 2026, they will get rid of all Russian pipeline gas or LNG. Then 27, all the pipeline gas. The only pipeline coming from Russia to Europe right now is Turkstream via Turkey. This is about 18 BCM this year. And Turkey has a huge gas import capacity beyond its own needs. Turkey consumes around 50 BCM a year. I think Turkey can import up to 80, 90 BCM, depending on the LNG and pipeline infrastructure. Therefore, Turkey is not going to be a huge replacement for Russian gas, but it could be a marginal player alongside Azerbaijan. And also
you said there that Turkey wants to be not just a bridge or a connection, a supplier for passing through, but provide an energy of its own that could play a role. But yet it has yet to harvest its Eastern Mediterranean opportunity while watching the likes of Israel or Cyprus, Egypt, even Lebanon now getting into the action. And yet Turkey has not yet sort of harvested its share of the East Med. Could 2026 be the year where Turkey takes that additional step of being a supplier itself not only for its own needs, but I mean, we saw an incredibly massive deal, Israel supplying gas to Egypt. I mean, unheard of only a few years ago. Where's Turkey in harvesting its own energy resources? Could this be the year 2026?
Well, I think initially the focus is going to be on Black Sea because Turkey has huge reserves there to the tune of about 750 billion cubic meters of gas sitting there in Black Sea. Turkey started producing this already. Perhaps there will be joint venture with Romania and Bulgaria and Ukraine as well when the peace comes. About the East Med, the main question is not about energy for Turkey. I have to tell you. It's more about geopolitics, sphere of influence, maritime boundaries, and Egypt, South Cyprus, Greece, and Israel ganging up together against Turkey. Turkey sees this as an alliance against it, and Turkey is not included in the EastMed gas export forum as well. So I don't think that there is much gas to be gained for Turkey in EastMed. It's more about demarcation lines right now. I expect some sort of tension growing there because if Turkey is excluded as the main power, which has the longest coastal borders, which has the greatest energy demand and transit capacity and military power, if you exclude Turkey from this picture, then it becomes a power that can spoil the game rather than play constructively for a zone of peace and also energy resources to be jointly mobilized. So also EU is not so keen to get EastMed gas right now. They focus
Well,
so much.
It's certainly one where it's a chicken and the egg, isn't it? Who's going to put the investment dollars into the ground to make it happen? If it was there, the Europeans, I'm sure, would take it. But who's going to put the billions? Let's just back up the waterway, though, up to the Black Sea. You mentioned there that that's really where the big opportunity for Turkey is. But of course, the Black Sea is a quagmire getting you closer into the conflict of Russia and Ukraine. We're seeing increasing activity where oil tankers and energy supply vessels are being targeted in this conflict. Where do you see that playing out and Turkey's ability to keep that waterways closed or open or keep the energy infrastructure in play? Of course, a lot of Kazakhstan oil comes through the Black Sea and Russian oil. What's your outlook for Turkey's role in keeping the Black Sea fluid?
You see, there are so many fronts on which Turkey has to struggle. And yes, it's an important strategic power, geostrategically, economically, historically, energy-wise, but it's overloaded. One is Black Sea, of course. There you have to deal with what happened to Georgia and Abkhazia and South Ossetia, annexed by Russia, Crimea, and now Donbas region, a peace, whether it will come or not in Ukraine-Russia war. If it comes, whether it's going to be fast, fair, and also lasting. And Turkey doesn't want Black Sea to be turned into a Russian lake if Ukraine is shut out of most of the Black Sea. And also Supsa, of course, where supplies are coming through the Black Sea to Bosphorus and the Mediterranean. Turkey has to be very careful in dealing a very balanced way and smart way with Russia in the Black Sea. It's a partner, it's a rival, it's a risk. As you said, some of the Turkish ships have already been targeted and destroyed by Russian bombs. We also saw some Russian drones coming all the way to Ankara, then hit down by Turkish F-16s. So it's a very delicate balancing act. Also, if there is going to be a settlement, thanks to Trump or whoever can do it, engineer it, whether Russia will be reaccepted to the European energy security. I doubt that. It's not going to happen soon.
You said there that the Trump or whoever can make this deal happen. Given what you just said, does Turkey not have a role to play at the beginning of this conflict between Russia and Ukraine? Turkey was a very active convener of the parties to try and do a deal, and nearly did do a deal, except for the British seemed to torpedo it in the end. But ultimately, does Turkey not have a role to play here in trying to get something done in 2026? What's your own prognosis? The momentum that seems to be one day moving forwards, the next day moving backwards.
Yes, if there is going to be a deal, I think Turkey will be one of the principal actors shaping it, but it prefers to stay behind the scene because this is where success could work. Otherwise, it may be spoiled. And Turkey is in a talking term with Zelensky and Putin and Trump. It's a unique position. No other country in NATO could do this. Therefore, if there is going to be a deal, I think Turkey will be one of the major facilitators because it has a vital interest for its own survival, for its own interest as well. So I believe that it's going to happen this year in 2026. And Trump trusts Erdogan, Putin and Zelensky trust also Erdogan. So there's going to be a deal. It will have some implications for the energy world as well, both in Europe, in the Caspian and Black Sea region. But Turkey is very worried about the possibility of Ukraine being crushed by the weight of this agreement and Russia having an upper hand. And NATO is not allowed to operate in Black Sea because of the Montreux Convention, which limits the entry of allied forces into Black Sea. So it has to navigate a very balancing act, very careful balancing act for Turkey. I think it's doing this quite successfully so far. And also don't forget, Russia is a primary supplier of natural gas to Turkey. It was also in oil, but because
does that compromise Turkey's ability to play a role, to enforce its own sense of outcome here? I mean, as a very big country in the region, a very big actor in the Black Sea, that the fact that it is so dependent on Russian gas?
Well, Russia also depends on Turkey for the nuclear power plant that it's building in Mersin Akkuyu. So it's, I think, give and take somehow. But it's a matter of trust between the leaders and also balancing the national interest. I think NATO respects Turkey because it has a strategic autonomy, although it doesn't like always Turkey acting independently from NATO and US. But still, Turkey has a role to play because it has credibility with Russia, with Ukraine, even with Iran and others, except Israel perhaps right now in East Med. Therefore, I think it is Turkey's diplomatic skills carefully deployed and appreciated by all sides. You need such a middleman somehow in the region who can help engineer some deals. Otherwise, it's not going to work.
Which ultimately, you mentioned in your opening comments that Turkey wants to be more than just a pass through a bridge. What's coming? What in this year, 2026, can Turkey deliver on that front? I mean, at the end of the day, Europe is looking for friends at the moment, but it doesn't seem to be knocking on Turkey's door. Can this be a moment where it brings Turkey and Europe back together again?
I think Europe wants, most European nations want that, especially Germany wanted to bring Turkey also the new European security architecture. There are two countries, Greece and South Cyprus, within the European Union trying to block that happen, or they want to extract more concessions from Turkey. Unfortunately, EU of 27 nations blocked on how they can move towards Turkey because there is no convergence of view. There are certain countries blocking any progress. The customs union didn't work. Modernization of didn't work, freedom of movement didn't work. So there is no stick and carrot in Turkish EU relations either. Therefore, Turkey prefers to take the strategic autonomy and have equal relationship if it can work. On energy, climate change, there's, I think, more need for Europe to work with Turkey rather than dealing with it as a peripheral nation that can bring transit energy resources. So unless EU decides and overcome Greek and Cyprus obstructions, such as structured strategic energy partnership will not work. And I don't think
it's unfortunate that if that was the case, because in every dark cloud there's a silver lining, and it seems to me that this would be a great opportunity to once and for all get Turkey and Europe together in a very productive future. Maybe once again, both of those parties will miss the opportunity. They'll take different crossroads and go in different directions. But we have to end this because we've got to go into Europe for the rest of the afternoon. Mehmet Öğütçü, chairman of the London Energy Club, one of Turkey's greatest geostrategic minds. Thank you for being with us at the Global Energy Outlook Forum 2026.
Wish all the best for all of us.